All right, welcome back. We are picking up in your student textbook on page 13 with paragraph 26. So go ahead and open that up. And we're just going to pick right up where we left off. So we'll get started. Scoot awakened as water seeped into her mouth and nose. For a moment, she could not understand where she was, how she got there, what had happened. Vaguely, she remembered the boat slanting steeply downward, as if it were suddenly diving, and she remembered feeling her body going up. That's all she remembered, and all she knew at the moment was that she had a fierce headache and was in chill water in total darkness. It took a little longer to realize she was trapped in the Sea Dog's cabin by the galley alcove. She began to feel around herself and to touch floating things. The air was thick with an oil smell. Then she ran her hand over the nearest solid thing, a bulkhead. That's strange, she thought. Her feet were touching a pot. She lifted her right arm and felt above her. The galley range. The galley range above her? The boat was upside down. She felt for the companionway steps and found the entry doors and pushed on them. That was the way she'd come in. The doors didn't move. So she's awake now, thankfully. She did not die in the accident. And it takes her a minute to kind of get her bearings and to realize what's happened. And she realizes that the boat is upside down. So she goes to the doors that she came in and they won't open. So you can imagine how she's feeling in that situation. Sully crawled up on the wide hull again, clinging to a faint hope that a boat or ship would soon come by. But the sun was already in descent, and with night coming on, chances of rescue lessened with each long minute. It was maddening to have her a few feet away and be helpless to do anything. Meanwhile, the hull swayed gently in eerie silence. All right, so let's stop here and let's do this make inferences part. So in paragraph 28, mark details that describe the setting. So what is the setting like? And then how do these details add tension to the central conflict? So how is that setting adding to our problem? So go ahead and pause and handle that. All right, thank you. So the biggest thing with our setting is that the sun is going down. And Sully realizes that the chance of a boat coming by at night is going to be really slim. They would have more of a chance for a boat coming by during the daytime. So it's not a good time for this to have happened. And that kind of adds to our problem because he really needs help. And even if he does get Scoot out of the cabin, they don't have much boat to float on or to sit on. So he really needs some help, and they really need somebody to come by and rescue them. All right, so paragraph 29. Scoot said tentatively, "Sully?" Maybe he'd been drowned. Maybe she was alone and would die here in the foul water. She repeated his name, but much more loudly. No answer. She was coming out of shock now, and fear icier than the water was replacing her confusion. To die completely alone? It went that way for a few desperate moments, and then she said to herself, "Scoot, you've got to get out of here. There has to be some way to get out." Sully clung to the keel with one hand, his body flat against the smooth surface of the hull. There was ample room on either side of the keel before the dead rise, the upward slope of the hull. The Sea Dog had a beam of 10 feet. Unless a wind and waves came up, he was safe enough in his wet perch. Scoot again wondered if her brother had survived, and if he was still around the boat or on it. With her right foot, she began to probe the space beneath her. The pot had drifted away, but her toes felt what seemed to be flatware. Flatware's like forks and knives and things like that. That made sense. The drawer with the knives and forks and spoons had popped out, spilling its contents. She took a deep breath and ducked under to pick out a knife. Coming up, she held the knife blade, reaching skyward with the handle. So it seems to me that she's got a plan. So let's read and see what that means. Eyes closed, brain mushy, exhausted, Sully heard a faint tapping and raised up on his elbows to make sure he wasn't dreaming. No, there was a tapping from below. he crawled back toward what he thought was the source area, the galley area, and put an ear to the hole. She was tapping. He pounded the fiberglass, yelling, "Scoot! Scoot! Scoot!" So let's pause here. Mark what Sully realizes in paragraph 33. So what does he realize in paragraph 33? And then what effect might this realization have on him? So go ahead and pause. All right, so his big revelation, the thing that he learns in paragraph 33 is that his sister Scoot is alive. And I would think what I inferred was that made him really happy, and it was almost like a relief. He wasn't sure if she was alive or dead, so when he finds out that she's alive, I think he's really relieved and really happy to know that she is okay. All right, so moving on, paragraph 34. Scoot heard the pounding and called out, "Sully, I'm here, I'm here." Her voice seemed to thunder in the air pocket. Sully yelled, "Can you hear me?" Scoot could only hear the pounding. "Help me out of here." Ear still to the hole, Sully shouted again, "Scoot, can you hear me?" No answer. He pounded again and repeated, "Scoot, can you hear me?" No answer. The hole was too thick, and the slop of sea, the moan of the afternoon breeze, didn't help. All right, so we have to read 38 through 45 to get this again and again part, so we'll keep going. Though she couldn't hear his voice, the mere fact that he was up there told her she'd escape. Sully had gotten her out of jams before. There was no one on earth that she'd rather have as a rescue man than her oldest brother. She absolutely knew she'd survive. So she has a lot of faith in him. That's good. Though it might be fruitless, Sully yelled down to the galley alcove. "Listen to me, Scoot. You'll have to get out by yourself. I can't help you. I can't break in. Listen to me. I know you're in water, and the best way out is through the skylight. You've got to dive down and open it. You're small enough to go through it." She could go through either section of the butterfly window. "Tap twice if you heard me." She did not respond, and he repeated what he'd just said, word for word. No response. No taps from below. Scoot couldn't understand why he didn't just swim down and open the doors to the cabin, release her. That's all he needed to do, and she'd be free. Sully looked up at the sky. "Please, God, help me, help us." It was almost unbearable to know she was alive and he was unable to do anything for her. Then he made the decision to keep repeating, "Listen to me, Scoot. You'll have to get out by yourself. I can't break in. Listen to me. The best way out is through the skylight. You've got to dive down and open it. You're small enough to go through it." He decided to keep saying it the rest of the day and into the night, or for as long as it took to penetrate the hull with words. "Skylight! Skylight!" over and over. All right, so back on page 15. So in paragraphs 38 through 45, underline words and phrases that Sully repeats. So again, he's repeating himself, and what is he repeating? And then what does that repetition reveal about Sully? So go ahead and handle that. All right, so he keeps repeating that set of instructions that he gave her about going through the skylight, that he can't help her, that she's on her own. And I think that repetition shows us that he's not going to give up. There's no physical way that he can get her out by himself, but he is going to keep trying to tell her how to get out. So he's not going to give up on his sister until she hears him. And I think that tells us a lot about who he is as a person, because he keeps saying it and keeps saying it and keeps saying it in the hopes that she will hear him. All right, paragraph 46. He'd heard of mental telepathy, but had not thought much about it before. Now it was the only way to reach her. So he's going to kind of think about it super duper hard and try to get it to pop into her brain and see if that works. All right, so 47 and 48. Scoot finally thought that maybe Sully was hurt, maybe helpless up on that bottom. So that was why he couldn't open the doors and let her out. That had to be the reason. Sully up there with broken legs. So I'll have to get out on my own, she thought. So his telepathy worked. Over the last 2 days, when she wasn't on the wheel, she had been exploring the Sea Dog, and she thought she knew all the exits. Besides the companionway doors, which she knew she couldn't open, there was a hatch on the foredeck for access to the sails. Then there was the skylight, almost in the middle of the long cabin. Sully had opened it, she remembered, to air out the boat before they sailed. As she clung to a light fixture by the alcove, in water up to her shoulders, something kept telling her she should first try the butterfly windows of the skylight. The unheard message was compelling. Try the skylight. All right, so let's do our aha moment over here. So mark 2 related realizations that Scoot has in paragraphs 47 and 48. And then connect. How do these realizations tie in with the words that Sully keeps repeating? So go ahead and pause. All right. So first of all, she realizes that she has to get out on her own. And then she realizes that she needs to try the skylight. So those are the 2 realizations that she has. And it's funny because that's exactly what her brother, Sully, keeps saying to her. So that's how they're connected. Those realizations that she has are the same things that her brother is telling her, but she can't hear them. All right, so paragraph 49. Sully's voice was almost like a recording, a mantra saying the same thing again and again, directed down to the position of the galley. Scoot remembered that an emergency flashlight was bracketed on the bulkhead above the starboard settee, and she assumed it was waterproof. From what Sully had said, Bo Tucker took great care in selecting emergency equipment. It might help to actually see the dogs in the metal skylight frame. She knew she wouldn't have much time to spin them loose, maybe 30 or 40 seconds before she'd have to surface for breath. Trying to think of the exact position of the upside-down flashlight, she again tapped on the hull to let her brother know she was very much alive. He pounded back. All right, so a memory moment. Underline what Scoot remembers in paragraph 50, and how do these memories help Scoot think through her situation? All right, so she remembers there's an emergency flashlight somewhere, and she knows that Bo Tucker, the man who owns the boat, has all the nicest things, and he has all... He took a lot of time in selecting the emergency equipment, so the things that they need if they're in an emergency, and she remembers those things. And so that kind of helps her think, okay, I got to find that flashlight, and maybe there's some other stuff there that can help me in this situation, and I'm gonna get my plan together before I try to do anything. So paragraph 52. Sully looked at his watch. Almost 4:30. About 3 hours to sundown. Of course, it didn't make much difference to Scoot. She was already in dank night. But it might make a difference if she got out after nightfall. He didn't know what kind of shape she was in. Injured, she might surface and drift away. The mantra kept on. Scoot dove twice for the boxy flashlight, found it and turned it on, suddenly splitting the darkness and immediately feeling hopeful. But it was odd to see the Sea Dog's unusual overhead, the open hatchways into the bilge and the debris floating on the shining water, all streaked with lubricants. Odd to see the toilet upside down. She held the light underwater, and it continued to operate. So she was right. The flashlight does work underwater. All right, paragraph 55. Every so often, Sully lifted his face to survey the horizon, looking for traffic. He knew they were still within 16 or 17 miles of the coast, though the drift was west. There was usually small boat activity within 20 miles of the shore, fishermen or pleasure boats. All right, so again, over here to the side, make inferences. In paragraph 55, mark details that describe the setting. So what else do we learn about where they are? And then what effect do these details have on the plot? So go ahead and pause the video and get that taken care of. All right, the next activity is for paragraphs 56 through 61, so I'm going to go ahead and read those. Scoot worked herself forward a few feet, guessing where the skylight might be, and then went down to find the butterfly windows, the flashlight beam cutting through the murk. It took a few seconds to locate them and put a hand on one brass dog. She tried to turn it, but it was too tight for her muscles, and she rose up to breathe again. Not knowing what was happening below or whether Scoot was trying to escape, Sully was getting more anxious by the moment. He didn't know whether or not the crazy telepathy was working. He wished she would tap again and let him know she was still alive. It had been more than 20 minutes since she last tapped. Scoot had seen a toolbox under the companionway steps and went back to try to find it. She guessed there'd be wrenches inside it unless they'd spilled out. Using the flashlight again, she found the metal box and opened it. Back to the surface to breathe again. Then back to the toolbox to extract a wrench. With each move, she was becoming more and more confident. A big sailboat beating south came into Sully's view, but it was more than 2 miles away, and the occupants, unless he was very lucky, would not be able to spot the Sea Dog's mound and the man standing on it, waving frantically. 4 times Scoot needed to dive, once for each dog, and working underwater was at least 5 times as difficult as trying to turn them in usual circumstances. She'd aimed the light and rested it to illuminate the windows. Finally, all the dogs were loose, and she rose once again. This time, after filling her lungs to bursting, she went down and pushed on the starboard window. It cracked a little, but the outside sea pressure resisted, and she had to surface again. Sully sat down, almost giving up hope. How long the air pocket would hold up was anybody's guess. The boat had settled at least 6 inches in the last 2 hours. It might not last into the night. So let's go back up to this part and annotate. In paragraphs 51 through 61, mark the parts of the story that keep you anxious about what will happen. So what parts, as we were reading, made you nervous? So go ahead and underline those. And then draw conclusions. How does the action in these paragraphs help the plot advance? So how does our story keep moving based on what happens in these paragraphs? So go ahead and pause. All right, so some of the parts that made me anxious were the fact that she's guessing where the skylight might be, so she doesn't really know. And he's kind of up on top, and he's nervous about it. And it had been at least 20 minutes since she tapped on the boat, so he doesn't know whether she's okay or not. She's having to dive back and forth. There's a sailboat that's there that Sully can see, but he doesn't think that they're going to be able to see him. And again, she's diving back and forth and loosening up each, I guess a dog is like a bolt or a screw that holds it together or closed. And then finally, he's just like giving up hope because the boat just keeps sinking. It's going lower and lower down in the water. And that advances our plot because a lot of things are happening. So at first we're like, okay, she's going to get out. Then Sully sees the boat and we're like, okay, they're going to get rescued. And then she isn't able to get out by the end of paragraph 61. And Sully doesn't have a lot of hope that the boat is going to be able to see them. So he's kind of given up hope on that. All right. So here at the side, it says annotate, mark and label the climax, the falling action, and the resolution. And then why are these 3 plot stages shorter than the rest of the story? So I think we're going to have to read a little bit more. Yeah, we'll finish the story, then we'll come back up to that. So paragraph 62. On her 6th dive, Scoot found a way to brace her feet against the ceiling ribs. She pushed with all her strength, and this time the window opened. Almost out of breath, she quickly pushed her body through, and the old sea dog released her. Treading water beside the hull, she sucked in fresh air and finally called out, "Sully!" He looked her way, saw the grin of triumph on the oil-stained imp face, and dived in to help her aboard the derelict. Derelict is like a ship that's turned upside down. Shivering, holding each other for warmth all night, they rowed and rocked, knowing that the boat was sinking lower each hour. Just after dawn, the Red Rooster, a long-range sports fishing boat out of San Diego bound south to fish for wahoo and tuna off the Reveladero Islands, came within 100 yards of the upside-down sailboat and stopped to pick up its 2 chattering survivors. The Red Rooster's captain, Mark Stevens, asked, "What happened?" "Rogue wave," said Sully. That's what he had planned to say to Bo Tucker as well. Stevens winced and nodded that he understood. The old sea dog stayed on the surface for a little while longer, having delivered her survivors to safety. Then her air pocket breathed its last, and she slipped beneath the water, headed for the bottom. All right, so let's go back up here. So in this story, we're going to label the climax, so the most exciting part, the falling action, how things are kind of wrapped up, and then finally the resolution, what happens at the very end. And then we're going to say, why are these three plot stages shorter than the rest of the story? So go ahead and pause the video and do that. All right, so our climax is, I would say, paragraph 62. That part where she's actually getting out of the boat and the old sea dog releases her and she's coming up and she's treading water. That's our climax. So then our falling action would be where they're sitting on the boat. Things are kind of wrapping up. They see the boat coming, the red rooster coming, and the captain is asking them what happened. And he says rogue wave. And then our resolution is that the kids are saved and the boat sinks into the ocean. And these three parts of the story are shorter because this story is all about keeping you on the edge of your seat, keeping you excited. So the long part needs to be the beginning so that you get to that point of excitement, that point of wanting to know what's happening next. And then the wrap up, how they solve the problem, can be really fast. So that's why those three stages of the plot are shorter. Now I would like for you to go through, and you don't have to do this with the video, but I want you to check your understanding. And there's a place where you can submit that on Canvas. So do it in your book first, then submit your answers on Canvas. And then also do this part where it says analyze the text. So do that in your book, and make sure that you've got that done. You do not have to do this bottom part where it says research. So please do not do the research part. Take care of the analyze the text in your book, please. And do the check your understanding in your book and submit your answers to Canvas. And if you have any questions, let me know.